Today we're going to talk about the different joints of the body. Some of these you've probably heard of, others of you maybe aren't familiar with. But joints of the body. First of all, we have a ball and socket joint. Maybe you've heard of that. Round end of bone fits snugly within another bone. Examples would be your shoulder. Okay, you see right there, and then your hip right there. Your shoulder is a lot more shallow than your hip. That's why people tend to dislocate a shoulder, where your shoulder, the ball comes out of its socket, much easier than someone who dislocates a hip. That's kind of rare. And someone does that because it's this one's deeper and it's harder for it to slip out. Shoulders not so much. You all probably know someone who dislocated a shoulder, so that's not that rare. But that's considered a ball and socket joint, kind of like if you've ever use some like a socket wrench. It works the same thing. The wrench goes into the socket, and then you can turn a bolt. So it's similar. If you've known someone with who's gotten like hip replacement, what they do basically is they will cut off the ball, and then they will push a rod into the femur. This is the top part of the femur, and then have a usually a metal titanium ball on the end, and then they'll kind of plop the ball into the socket. So they basically kind of replace the ball. Like this gets worn out, maybe no cartilage, maybe it's bone grinding away. So if someone, a lot of times your grandparents and things got a hip replaced. I think Mr. McDonald got a hip replaced. They cut that off and put an artificial one on there. So that's a ball and socket joint. Hinge joint would be like your knee or your elbow. Your joint can move in one direction, like a hinge. You have hinges on our doors. Most of our doors can open one way, but not the other way. That's how your knee works. Maybe you've seen like a bad knee injury in sports where their leg bends somewhere where it's not supposed to. Something happened with that hinge that caused the injury. Same with the elbow. You've maybe seen someone with who's dislocated a knee or an elbow, or you've seen a video of it or something, and it's kind of cringy because those things aren't supposed to move that way. So a hinge joint. Pivot joint would be like your wrists, your ankles with your carpals or metacarpals, the top of your neck, the very top of your cervical vertebrae. They kind of pivot on each other. That's why you're able to turn your neck one way and the other. Fixed, immovable. So actually, the definition of a joint is anywhere where two or more bones come together. So you might not think of your skull as a joint, but it actually is. It's a fixed joint, meaning you can't move it. We have bones coming together, but they're not easily moved. Usually the kind of the general rule is the more movement a joint allows, the more likely you are to get injured. So like a lot of people injure their shoulders. Well, their shoulder, you can move it in many directions, pretty far. A lot of people injure knees, okay, because a knee, bends and bends a lot and supports weight. It can move a lot. Well, you don't hear a lot of people dislocating their skull because your skull doesn't move. It's not that doesn't happen too often. Gliding joints in your wrists as well. They'll glide over the top of it. I know we had said some pivot. There is some pivoting in there, like with your radius and ulna on your wrist, but there's also gliding in there as well. So it's kind of goes together. Now, holding things together, ligaments connect bone to bone. Ligaments are basically a stretchy rubber band that is going to connect one bone to another. So you've probably heard of someone tearing their ACL in their knee. Okay, they tore their anterior cruciate ligament, their ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, or there's LCL, MCL, and PCL. These are different ligaments that hold the knee together. Okay, maybe you've heard of someone, a pitcher having Tommy John surgery. Okay, I believe that's their UCL, their ulnar ligament. So a ligament is a stretchy band that connects bone to bone. They stretch, but if they get overstretched too far, they're going to snap. It's exactly like a rubber band. You can stretch a rubber band 1,000 times, but if you stretch it too far, it's going to snap. And that's what happens with your ligaments and your knees and your hips and shoulders and all of that. A tendon is going to connect muscle to bone. We'll get into that more when we talk muscle later on. But tendons connect muscle to bone, and they work together to move your skeleton. A lot of people mix up ligaments and tendons. Ligament is bone to bone. Tendons are bone to muscle. Cartilage. Cartilage, we've talked about this before, about how you have cartilage in your rib cage to help flex. You have cartilage in your nose and your ears. But we also have cartilage in our joints that are going to act as kind of padding in our joint. Maybe you've heard of the term meniscus. Like if you have, I'll use knee a lot because it's pretty common. You have meniscus in your knee, which is basically a cartilage pad in your knee that when you jump or run or walk, it cushions kind of like a pillow and keeps your bones from grinding on each other. Keeps your tibia and your femur from grinding bone on bone. You don't want that. Over time, as you get older, this meniscus, this padding, will get worn out. Okay, it'll get mashed down, kind of like a pillow that you've used for several years. It might have like a head spot in it, or like maybe you have a spot on the couch that you like to sit that kind of has your imprint on it. Well, that's what happens with your meniscus, this cartilage, over time. Is it'll get worn out, and you'll start having bone grinding on bone. And usually that ends up being painful, and it gets worse and worse until you have to have knee replacement surgery, which is something that's pretty common. I know Mr. Hausman had that. I think of someone else who had that. Several people have had that I'm sure you've known of. Maybe grandma's had that or something. So cartilage acts as a kind of a shock absorber, a cushion in there. So we got ligaments holding the bones together. We got that cushion cartilage, and then there's also this stuff called synovial fluid, which is joint fluid that kind of acts as like oil in there. As it keeps friction away. You don't want your bones to grind on each other. You want it to move fluidly. So there's synovial fluid on there. I've had like fluid drained from my knee when I was in high school because for whatever reason it kept producing more than it needed. So my knee looked like there was a balloon in it, and so they put a big needle in there and sucked it out and got rid of some of that synovial fluid. Problems with your skeletal system. You've all heard of a fracture. A fracture just means it's a break. Okay, if you fracture your wrist, you broke your wrist. It could be a small fracture. You may have heard of something like a hairline fracture. If you have a hairline fracture in your spine or something, it's just a small crack that could get worse if you don't let it heal. Or some things are big, like a compound fracture. This is a picture of a compound fracture. It looks like someone broke their tibia and fibula, both of them. This is probably poking through the skin, is my guess. So there's many different kinds of fractures. Some of them mean some of them aren't that big of a deal. Others are like this X-ray here is a pretty big deal. Maybe you've heard of like shin splints. If you ever had shin splints, it's small cracks in your tibia that aren't. You don't have to worry about your tibia breaking, but it's really painful. So that would be a type of fracture as well. Dislocation just means a joint came undone, came out of its socket. Like a knee, a hip, shoulder, elbow, those are the common ones. Other problems with your skeletal system, if you sprain something, almost everyone over the time of their life will sprain an ankle. What that means is that you basically stretched your ligaments in your ankle too far. So, like your ligaments are like big rubber bands. If you stretch them too far, where they don't snap, but they get overstretched, that's spraining an ankle. So, if you've ever like walked or ran and rolled your ankle, kind of stepped funny, okay, you might have overstretched your ligaments. So, usually not that big of a deal. Sometimes they take X-rays anyway, but just to make sure nothing's broken. Arthritis, inflammation in your joints. Sometimes that's genetic. Sometimes if you do things over a long period of time, you're going to have arthritis. It's pretty common for people who have done physical jobs over a long period of time. Like if you worked construction for 40 years, odds are you probably have arthritis in your hands and things because you're using them all the time. Scoliosis of the spine is another common issue with the skeletal system here. As you see, this spine here is straight. That's how it should look from behind if you're looking at this person from behind. Some people have this twist in their spine like this called scoliosis. Kind of makes a question mark or an S with their spine. It's just something you're born with, and usually as you get older it gets worse. I knew someone from high school who had scoliosis like this, and once they got to a certain age, I think he had to wait till he was 16, he had surgery where they straightened his spine and they put 2 rods in his back from here all the way up here, and they straightened everything out, and then they screwed the rod to his spine. And he went in for surgery. The next time I seen him, he was like 2 inches taller because they took this curve out of his back and straightened everything out, and now he looked like this. Now he didn't have the flexibility that most people had, but it took that. It relieved the pressure off of his spine. So scoliosis, some people have maybe just a little bit of it. Some people have it like this guy had it really bad. Another thing, osteoporosis, your brittle bones. This usually happens in older people. Usually older women. If that's why they say drink your milk when you're a kid, so you can get nice thick bones. Because when you get older, your bones start becoming brittle, and that's why you hear of grandma falling down and breaking a hip easy. It happens a lot more with older people. You're not going to hear of a 3-year-old falling down and breaking a hip because of osteoporosis. So that happens when you get older, so make sure you take care of your bones now when you're young. I think that was it. I thought there was something else I was going to say. Another thing I've heard of is people having gout. Maybe you've heard of that. In your joints, you might have in your joints the synovial fluid, your joint fluid, sometimes crystallizes in there, and it's basically like little pieces of ice that when you move it, it grinds in there and it hurts. I think it's a genetic thing. There's certain things in your diet that make gout happen more often. But other than that, I think we are done. Have a good day.